They murdered old man Tiber, that 80-pound blue cat, the one with the notched fin who'd come right up to my canoe for a piece of liver. He was floating belly up this morning, alongside maybe 400 other fish. I mean hundreds. The water itself was this hideous, unnatural shade of turquoise, like industrial coolant mixed with a bad mood, all because the queen bee of the HOA finally lost her mind and decided she owned the 12 acres my grandpappy left me. I stood there, knee-deep at the edge of the dock, holding Tiber's slimy, lifeless body. His eyes were milky and dull, and the smell was already turning my stomach, that sharp metallic tang of copper sulfate cutting through the usual scent of honeysuckle and lake mud. Pure industrial poison, dumped like common trash. That's when the rage hit me. That clean, blinding fury a simple man gets when some entitled jerk tries to destroy something you love just because they can. It wasn't just a fish, you know? It was 70 years of history. A whole damn ecosystem. Wiped out. Her name is Celeste Thorne, and she's the sort of woman who pronounces scone like it has a silent P, and probably schedules her bowel movements. She drove a white Porsche that never saw a dirt road, and she had appointed herself the dictator of the preserve at Whisperwood, that big, sterile McMansion development that swallowed up the old farmland surrounding my property here in Cedar Creek, Tennessee. She sees the world through the lens of property value, and my non-conforming life was a smudge on her perfect suburban masterpiece. But then, the lightning bolt hit me, that slow burn realization that makes your blood run cold, and then instantly hot with a kind of beautiful, dark glee. It wasn't just a discovery. It was an epiphany. Celeste's precious preserve. All 835 of those perfectly manicured, debt-loaded houses. They pull their drinking water from the exact same ancient, underground spring system that feeds my little lake. Every drop, every shower, every ice cube maker in her suburban fiefdom was drawing on the water she had just deliberately poisoned. She didn't just kill my fish. She laced her entire neighborhood's water supply with industrial toxins, and she had absolutely no idea what kind of biblical reckoning was heading her way. It was the purest, sweetest form of cosmic justice I'd ever tasted. My name is Jed Stone. I'm 55, a master carpenter, the kind of guy who fixes things with his hands and believes people should just mind their own damn business. My family has owned this creekfront property since the Korean War, back when it was just timber and silence, and the nearest neighbor was 2 miles down a dirt road. This lake, we call it the Big Lick, has always been my sanctuary. I walk the same path Grandpappy laid down every morning, boots crunching on the gravel, smelling that mix of pine and clean, cold spring water, watching the bass jump. It's my peace, my inheritance, and my quiet way of life. Then Celeste moved in. She's a corporate lawyer, specialized in eminent domain, and she took over the Whisperwood HOA in under 8 months, instantly launching her aesthetic compliance initiatives, which, translated, meant if she didn't like your shrubbery, or your fence height, or the sight of a working-class man catching his dinner, she would deploy the full weight of her legal training to make your life a living hell. She saw my old dock, my grandfather's pride and joy, as a blight on her portfolio. Her first shot was a certified letter, fancy embossed stationery, legal jargon about disruptive non-conforming activities and threats of fines. My crime, my unsightly fishing. She paid $700,000 for a lakefront view, and the view of a man enjoying the lake, the way it had been enjoyed for 70 years, was, apparently, ruining her investment optimization. I called my friend, Rick, a property lawyer who knows his way around Tennessee statutes. Rick just laughed and said, "Jed, property that predates the HOA's formation cannot be retroactively subjected to their covenants. She's threatening you with laws that don't exist. Your deed date is a legal fortress, son." So, when intimidation failed, she switched to warfare. Legal warfare is messy, but psychological warfare is dirtier. Every morning, 6 a.m., sun just cresting the ridge. When I'd head out to the dock, her landscape crew, a trio of guys in matching vests, looking miserable as hell, would fire up the heavy diesel mowers, leaf blowers and chainsaws right along her property line. She paid them triple overtime just to create a wall of ear-splitting noise and exhaust fumes, thick enough to choke on, trying to drive me off my own dock. I just kept fishing. I'd sit there, diesel smoke mixing with the honeysuckle, reeling in bass just to make a point. Some principles you just gotta stand your ground, even if it smells like a truck stop and sounds like a demolition derby. But I knew she wasn't done. She wasn't built to lose. 2 weeks later, she hired the most expensive surveyor in 3 counties. A guy with a name like Sterling, or Sterlingworth. He showed up with gear that looked like it belonged on the moon. GPS units, laser levels, equipment that probably cost more than my entire truck. They spent 8 hours meticulously measuring the exact same property line Grandpappy staked out with concrete posts back in '65. Pure harassment, with a 5-figure invoice that probably made her accountant wince. 3 days later, the lawsuit landed. She was suing me for property encroachment, all over 6 inches of my dock extending into what she claimed were community water access rights. 6 inches. The court stamps, the filing fees, the cost of the legal paper alone probably exceeded the value of that half-foot of weathered lumber. It showed me exactly who she was. A woman with the resources and the malice to commit to ruining a man's life over a triviality. That's when I decided 2 could play the research game. I spent the weekend down at the dusty county courthouse basement. That special kind of government purgatory that smells like old paper and crushed municipal dreams, digging through the original deed records. My fingers were black with archival dust. I was looking for a defense, a simple legal shield against her nonsense. What I found was a guided missile. The original 1952 deed for my land wasn't just a simple parcel transfer. It contained a single, powerful paragraph, written in that ornate, tedious legal script that makes your eyes glaze over, stating, including all water rights surface and subsurface to underground spring system and tributaries thereto in perpetuity. In perpetuity. I sat there in that buzzing, dusty silence, holding a 70-year-old document, and that Latin phrase, forever and ever, echoed in my head. Grandpappy didn't just buy the land. He was smart enough or lucky enough to buy every drop of water flowing underneath it. The aquifer that fed my little big lick extended for miles beneath the very ground Celeste Thorne was busy scheduling her life on. Legally, every time a resident of the preserve flushed a toilet, watered their pristine lawn, or filled their pool, they were using my water. The developer back in 2008 had just made the rookie mistake of assuming that owning the land meant owning the water underneath it. Expensive assumption. Career-ending mistake. I called Rick, and after a minute of high-pitched cackling that sounded like a deranged hyena, he managed to gasp out, "Jed, you don't have a defense. You have a nuclear weapon disguised as a property deed." We filed a countersuit immediately. Harassment, malicious prosecution, slander. The timing was pure cinema, the kind of poetic justice you usually only see in the movies. Celeste was hosting a huge summer garden party. All 40 of the HOA board members and their perfectly coiffed spouses, standing around with champagne flutes, talking about property values and their new summer retreats. Right in the middle of her toast about maintaining community standards, the county sheriff's deputy, a big, polite guy named Dale, walked right up her lawn. "Ma'am, I need to serve you with some legal documents." 40 conversations instantly died. The only sound was the clinking of nervous ice in the glasses, the air heavy with expensive perfume and sudden dread. Celeste's face, usually set in that lawyerly mask of superiority, went bone white as she read the papers detailing the $30 million I could legally demand. "This is harassment," she shrieked, loud enough to rattle the patio doors. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me." Her guests scattered faster than roaches when the lights come on, suddenly remembering urgent appointments. But humiliation only made her more toxic, more dangerous. The very next morning, I found a little printed card tucked under my windshield wiper. It smelled faintly of chlorine, that unmistakable scent of industrial chemicals. It was the card for deep water algae solutions. The message scrawled underneath just said, "Stop fishing or face the consequences." A confession, waiting to happen. What came next wasn't just petty spite. It was an act of full-blown environmental terrorism. While I was out of town helping my sister with a roofing job, Celeste made her move. She called Deepwater, lied through her perfect veneered teeth, claiming my lake was community property. with a dangerous algae bloom threatening public health. She paid them $3,500 in cash for a midnight chemical assault. I drove home Sunday evening. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Copper sulfate and mass death. It hit me before I even shut off the truck engine. And there was Tiber, floating 20 feet from the dock, bloated and lifeless. 3 years of feeding that old cat, watching him grow into a legend. Wiped out in 26 minutes of chemical warfare, according to the security footage Rick later found. As I stood there shaking, trying to process the ecological genocide, my old electrician's brain, the one that wired half this county and understands plumbing and flow rates, started connecting the dots. I'd done utility work for several houses in Whisperwood. I knew their well depths. Every single house pulled its water from the same limestone spring system that fed my lake. The same spring, the same water source, the same flow path that was now saturated with industrial-strength copper sulfate. I rushed a water sample to an independent lab the next morning, knowing deep down what the results would be. And they were terrifying. Copper sulfate levels 4 times the EPA's safe drinking standard. Celeste hadn't just poisoned my lake. She'd turned her pristine million-dollar community into a toxic waste site. She was about to drink her own poison and make 800 families drink it too. Sweet, slow-burn karma never tasted so metallic or so terrifyingly dangerous. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. See, my discovery of the water rights went from a quaint legal defense to a full-blown humanitarian crisis overnight. The developer, back in 2008, had assumed he owned the water. Now, for 15 years, 835 families had been drawing my water, and now they were all drinking poison delivered by their own HOA president. Copper sulfate contamination causes stomach pain, nausea, and can lead to liver and kidney damage, especially in children. We were staring down the barrel of a public health emergency. I realized I couldn't handle this alone. This wasn't a property line dispute anymore. It was the biggest water rights case in state history, coupled with a massive federal environmental crime. I assembled my Avengers. First, Rebecca Torres, an environmental lawyer out of Nashville, who specialized in taking down corporations that thought poisoning communities was just good business. She reviewed the file, her eyes gleaming like polished granite. "Jed," she told me, "this is not a lawsuit. This is a masterclass in legal warfare." Her strategy was brilliant. Hit them from every direction simultaneously. Federal, state, civil, and criminal, before they could even mount a coordinated defense. They'd be too busy putting out fires to fight back. Second, Dr. James Mitchell, a hydrogeologist from the State University. We met at the polluted lake. He waded into the unnatural turquoise water with equipment that cost more than my truck, meticulously mapping the aquifer structure. "Fascinating but deadly," he muttered. "Single-source spring feeding residential wells. Contamination will reach peak saturation within 8 weeks. We're looking at close to 1,000 affected properties. The scientific hammer that would crush any doubt." Third, Sarah Morgan, an investigative journalist who'd spent years dismantling corrupt HOAs. She looked at my evidence, the 1952 deed, the lab results, the photos of Celeste's husband's landscape crew dumping trash, and her eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Power-drunk HOA tyrant poisons entire neighborhood while terrorizing the guy who legally owns their water supply," she whispered, already pitching the story in her head. "CNN will fight MSNBC for this one, Jed. This is Pulitzer material." While my team prepped, Celeste was busy trying to cover her tracks. She tried to bribe the owner of Deepwater Algae Solutions, offering 10 grand in cash to lose the service records. What she didn't know is that environmental service companies keep records meticulously. And the owner, a smart guy named Derek, recorded the whole frantic conversation, sensing a massive liability case. Then she came after me with anonymous, fabricated complaints to the state contractor licensing board, trying to shut down my solar business. It cost me 2 weeks and thousands of dollars in legal fees to resolve. But this time, I documented every single call, every complaint, every minute of bureaucratic harassment. I was building a case for aggravated defamation and abuse of process. Her final, most stupid move? The ultimate display of hubris. She showed up at my house one Thursday evening. She pulled up in her Porsche, carrying a thin leather briefcase. The setting sun cast long shadows across my driveway as she clicked up my gravel path. "Jed, I think we can resolve this like reasonable adults," she purred, setting the briefcase on my porch railing. She snapped it open to reveal neat stacks of $100 bills. $100,000 cash, to drop all legal action and sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. What she didn't know was that Rick had wired me up after her PI was arrested. Tennessee, thankfully, is a one-party consent state, a beautiful thing. "You're offering me money," I said, making sure the little wire caught every syllable, "to cover up the fact that you poisoned my lake and contaminated your neighborhood's entire water supply." Her face went from fake friendly to glacial in a second. Her voice, however, remained ice-cold and professional. "I'm offering you a reasonable settlement to resolve a property dispute," she countered, lawyer speak dripping like venom. "This is a good faith gesture to avoid protracted litigation." "It's called attempted bribery, Celeste," I told her, my voice calm but hard. "You're trying to buy silence for a federal environmental felony. Now get off my property before I add trespassing to the list of charges." She snapped the briefcase shut, the sound sharp as a gunshot, and peeled out of my driveway, spitting gravel. But the recording was secured, and the sound of her tires peeling out was the sweetest sound I'd heard all year. The community health crisis escalated. Parents were documenting symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. When the EPA investigators arrived, they confirmed the copper sulfate contamination was rapidly approaching emergency thresholds. Property values in the preserve at Whisperwood dropped like stones. Millions of dollars wiped out overnight by the federal health advisory. The final confrontation was scheduled for a community center meeting. 300 people crammed in, standing room only. News cameras in the back. EPA reps sitting grimly in the front row with their official badges. Celeste sat on stage with the remaining HOA board members. Her designer suit perfect, but her eyes had that unmistakable cornered animal look. She kept checking her phone, frantically looking for a life raft that wasn't coming. The EPA doctor didn't mince words. She displayed the bright red numbers on the projector screen. Contamination 4 times the safe level, originating from the industrial algicide dumping at my lake. The room was a powder keg of shouting, anger, and fear. Then the new board president, Patricia, a kind woman who was tired of the tyranny, cleared her throat and introduced me. I walked to the microphone. Every eye followed. Every camera swiveled. "Most of you know me as the difficult neighbor who wouldn't stop fishing," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the triumph I felt. Celeste shot up. "That's slander. He's a liar." The sheriff's deputy, Dale, who was standing nearby, simply ordered, "Sit down, Mrs. Thorne. Now." I held up the yellowed 1952 deed. "This document states plain as day, I own the water rights to the entire aquifer feeding this subdivision. Every drop from your taps for the last 15 years legally belongs to me." The confused shouting erupted again, anger, shock, and a sudden, paralyzing fear mixing in the crowd. I held up my hand. "I'm not here to bankrupt anyone. I'm waiving all back payments. That's $30 million you won't owe me." A visible wave of collective relief washed over the crowd. "But," I continued, letting the word hang in the charged air, "Celeste Thorne poisoned my lake with industrial chemicals, destroying 70 years of family heritage and contaminating water that belonged to me. Then she covered it up while your children got sick." Rebecca Torres stood up, detailing the charges: federal environmental destruction, state illegal dumping, embezzlement of HOA funds, and the recorded bribery attempts. As Dale walked toward the stage, Celeste went ghost white, finally realizing the game was over. "This is a setup. He poisoned his own lake to frame me. Ma'am, I have an arrest warrant for environmental crimes and obstruction of justice," Dale stated, his voice firm, pulling out the cuffs. The room exploded, a mix of cheers, gasps, and shouts. Celeste shrieked, "You'll all regret this!" "I'll sue every one of you. That redneck is manipulating you." Her final mask gone, pure classism and rage on display for the entire community and the news cameras. As she was escorted out, I returned to the microphone and laid out the settlement. Full environmental restoration funded by her assets and HOA insurance. No back payments, and independent oversight to prevent this kind of tyranny ever again. Accountability without collective punishment. The crowd's anger shifted to cautious, exhausted hope. We gave them a path forward. 6 months after Celeste's arrest, I stood on my dock at sunrise. The water was crystal clear again, the clean, mineral smell replacing the chemical stench. Dr. Mitchell's bioremediation plan, using natural bacteria and strategic water cycling, worked better than predicted. Old Man Tiber's descendants were thriving. Celeste got what she earned: 3 years federal prison, 5 years probation, a $75,000 fine in restitution, and her law license permanently revoked. She lost everything trying to destroy one man who just wanted to fish in peace. The biggest change, though, was here in Cedar Creek. The new HOA board implemented real transparency rules and democratic governance, and the twist nobody saw coming. I opened my lake for community fishing. Every Saturday morning, families from the subdivision fish under proper environmental management. Kids who never held a rod before are learning to cast from the same dock where Grandpappy taught me. The grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust, funded by the settlement, now teaches water conservation and aquatic biology to local schools. This place feels alive again. Our legal stand didn't just win a fight. It inspired new state laws limiting HOA power and requiring financial transparency, protecting thousands of future homeowners across Tennessee. Sometimes the best way to defeat your enemies isn't destruction. It's building something better and more beautiful from the ruins of their mistakes. It's choosing community over petty revenge. Now I want to hear from you. Have you dealt with a power-hungry HOA or a property rights nightmare? Did you find a loophole or a piece of forgotten history that helped you fight back? Did you choose justice or did you choose revenge? Drop your story in the comments below. We need to share these experiences. Real experiences create real change. And remember, whether you're in Cedar Creek, Tennessee, or anywhere else dealing with petty tyrants, you are not alone. Communities are stronger than tyrants, and the truth is always more powerful than corruption. Hit that like button, subscribe, and protect what's yours.